Hey everybody, so in front of me here is my Enlightened equipment quilt, which I have since modified. It used to be a 30-degree quilt. When I originally got it, it was the Enlightened, this is the Enigma 30, but I've since modified that, so I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the quilt and, kind of like a quick review on the quilt, my thoughts on, and, thinking behind getting the modification. And also I wanted to talk about just generally dealing with hiking and sleeping outside in a temperate environment or a moist, humid environment. So if you live in an area that gets a lot of rain and you're having to deal with, a lot of condensation, and of course condensation and humidity affect loft in, down, clothing or sleeping bags, quilts, etc. Right? This is an issue that can be tricky to mitigate or to deal with, right? So yeah, we'll get into that and some other alternatives. If you don't modify, what else you can do. But yeah, let's get into, I say quick review because I feel like many people have already pointed out the shortcomings that Enlightened equipment had with their quilts a few years ago. Now, in fairness to the company, right, they seem to have listened to a lot of these constructive criticisms that their quilts were not accurately rated. And I can say from my experiences, that was the case with my quilt. I ordered this back in 2016. It was a 30-degree quilt, as I mentioned before, but it was definitely not that in reality. I took it out on several occasions, not just me, but also my wife. She sleeps colder than I do. I guess that's also worth noting that I'm kind of a warmer sleeper. Take that with a grain of salt. Of course, I'm talking about subjective feelings of warmth, but I have pushed, as a comparison, I have a 40 degrees Z-Packs down bag, and I have pushed that down to slightly below freezing, and it felt about the same as this one, this 30-degree bag. So I would say that the original quilt that I got, and I guess I should show you some details on the quilt too, and not just talk at a flat quilt on the ground. You can see I got the inside in red, and with the 850 fill down, resistant down, and there's a couple of clips that it comes with. I generally don't attach it to my pad. I bundle up in it more like a sleeping bag, really. So I have one. This is an extra strap that I had added to it. Here's the other clip here, and then an extra strap that I had added to it. That's part of the modifications, which I'll get into a bit more. But anyway, so there's a little bit closer look at the back side of the quilt and all that. But anyway, it was more like, this quilt was definitely more like a 40 degree or 35 degree at most, quilt. So problem, it's not warm enough, and not only that, because I live in a climate where your loft is reduced by moisture, and even having the water repellent down, it's nice to get, to wick moisture out of your bag. So luckily for me, I found a really cool guy on the Make Your Own Gear subreddit. I noticed he was making some really high quality looking quilts. His name is Ryan, and he goes by the UL Enchilada. So I'll put his email in the description below. I'll also put a link to a thread where we have pictures of the quilt, and we discuss, the whole modification process and everything. He was really good about documenting the whole process of modifying it. But now, so yeah, that's pretty much it for my quick review of the Enlightened equipment quilt. It wasn't warm enough, and not only that, it was drafty, and yeah, so I needed to have that solved. But otherwise, it was comfortable. It was well made. The stitching was straight and all that, right? But others have pointed out to the design that other quilts seem to not be as drafty due to some other designs. But yeah, so what did I do? I sent Ryan my quilt, and then I sent him a layer of 2.5 ounce Apex synthetic insulation, and so that's on the inside here. You're not gonna be able to see it, of course. And then I sent him some black polyester. I opted for polyester because it's hydrophobic, and it has a slightly higher, it's 15 denier, which is a bit better at blocking wind. But yeah, so there's a layer now sewn onto the whole bag, and honestly, you can't really tell by looking at it that it's like got all these layers. It's got the red nylon, then the down, of course, then it's got another layer of nylon. That's the original quilt, but then on top of that, then a layer of apex, and then the final layer. So why, have all this? I did take a bit of a penalty in weight, but honestly not that much when you compare. Because now I would say this quilt, rather than a 30, is definitely more like a 20-degree quilt, maybe even slightly warmer. I've tested this out in -3 degrees. What would that be in Fahrenheit? Like, I guess the 20s, right? And I was comfortable. And recently I went on a section hike and it was around freezing-ish, maybe slightly above, maybe 1-2 degrees. And I slept toasty warm. And interestingly, I felt warmer sleeping in sub-freezing, sub-zero conditions than I did sleeping in the humid kind of, dew point conditions of like +1 degrees, like, just above freezing. Those of you that are familiar with this kind of, weather or, environment, you'll know that any kind of moisture, gets into clothing and gets into your bag and decreases the loft and makes it less efficient. In fact, I live in Sweden, people from the north of Sweden where it's much colder, I live in the south of Sweden, when they move to the south, they often say that it feels colder here in the south because it's more humid and the temperatures often don't go down way cold in the minus degrees. It'll stay at around freezing. And that's when, moisture just won't go away. It's just not cold, dry enough to, be warm. But yeah, so yeah, I've talked about my review. I've talked about the modification, right? And now I'm talking about kind of efficient, warmth, right? But yeah, let's get back to the weight, because you have to pay a bit of weight to have this, synthetic insulation on top. The weight of this quilt and that's with the extra clips and everything, is 745 grams. And normally if you have a 20-degree down bag, your weight is going to range around 550 to 700 grams, depending on the size and the kind of down, etc., right? But generally that's the area you're looking for a 20-degree bag. I saw recently somebody was doing a review of a Enlightened Equipment 20 bag, and it was in a size, long regular, and it was around 600 and some grams. Now this one is, like 100 grams or maybe 50 grams extra, but the efficiency is what you get as a benefit. The wicking of the moisture, to have the synthetic layer on the outside, right? And if there's any condensation on this, final layer, right? It's not going to be as big of a deal, because then the inside is going to be warmer, drier, puffier. And yeah, now if you don't want to go through the trouble of having, either a custom quilt made, or you can actually, Nunatac does sell what they call the Nebula Quilt, where they will build you a down and synthetic quilt together. It is going to cost you, but some other things, and something I've been doing for years to deal with this problem of moisture, is I've been using this SOL Escape Light Bivy. This weighs 150 grams, so that's actually less weight than a lot of clothing. I've noticed when I compared this with clothing in colder temperatures, when I thought, okay, if I take some more layers to be warmer, but then I thought, well, wait a minute, this bivy only weighs 150 grams. That's less than like a merino wool, say, base layer, right? So if you're looking for not too much money, improve not only on the warmth, but also the efficiency to like wick out moisture, I found that this material is actually quite breathable and has worked quite well. I've had very little or no condensation using this bivy. So combine, if you have like a summer or 3-season quilt and you're looking for warmth, you can always add this bivy for warmth, or you could make your own synthetic, Apex bivy. It's quite easy. You know what I'll do is I'll put a link to Joe Brewer's channel. He has a great video on how to make your own synthetic quilt if you want to, or you can, you can buy one from either Enlightened Equipment, or you can send an email to, my buddy Ryan, the Ultralight Enchilada. He'll be happy to make you a like a summer quilt with the 2.5 apex. Now the apex comes in different thicknesses. Obviously, if you live in a much colder place, you're going to want to get if you're doing this layering, which I suggest you do if if you really want to be warm, have down on the inside, synthetic on the outside, for all the benefits. But you can get from 2.5 thickness, the 5.0 thickness, 7. It goes all the way up to 10, of the synthetic insulation. But yeah, as far as ultralight backpacking or backpacking, in general goes, Climashield Apex is one of the best or the best synthetic insulations you're going to be able to use. Yeah, so there, I rambled on and on about this great modified quilt of mine. This is going to be, my go-to quilt for spring and fall and early winter use. And I liked the modification, and I liked, the Ultralight Enchilada's work so much. I saw pictures of his other quilts. They look great. I actually, I need to replace my old 40-degree quilt. So I'm replacing that with a 35-degree down quilt to use like in the warmer months, like from roughly May to the fall. So I'll do, hopefully in the future, I'll do a review of that quilt. Yeah, looking forward to that. I'm excited because this new quilt I'm getting and a lot of the newer gear I'm like putting together is because in the future I'm looking to do through hikes. I've been a perpetual section hiker, but hopefully soon, the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm getting more time to be able to hopefully do some shorter through hikes and then some longer through hikes. But yeah, that's a bit of my plans of the future. But yeah, this one will be this fills a nice, wide range of, the colder temperatures, spring and the fall and early winter. But yeah. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you. Stay warm out there. There are plenty of good options, right? Look to combine, look for good layers of clothing, of course. You can use a bivy, a warmth for warmth. Yeah, take care. Happy trails.